My name is Elias Grant. I'm 38 years old. For the last 7 years, I've been working overseas in construction management. Long, relentless hours in Dubai's heat, building someone else's skyline so I could send money home to my family. Every month, without fail, I wired my paycheck to my mother's account. She said it was for household needs and for taking care of my dad. I didn't ask questions. I trusted them. I thought I was doing the right thing. I hadn't seen my family in almost 4 years. There was always some excuse: your sister's wedding plans, Dad's stable. No need to rush. We're handling everything, Eli. Focus on your career. But something about the last call felt off. My mother sounded too breezy when I asked how Dad was. So I booked a ticket. I didn't tell anyone I was coming. I just packed my bags and flew home. It was a cold Monday morning when I landed. I took a cab straight from the airport to the house, expecting to find Dad in the living room, maybe watching one of his old war movies, wrapped in his wool blanket. But the house was empty. I walked from room to room, calling his name. No reply. It was clean. Too clean. No dishes, no signs of anyone living there, just silence, like the walls themselves had been abandoned. I called my mother, straight to voicemail, same with my brother, then my sister. No one picked up. My gut tightened. I tried one of Dad's old friends, a retired neighbor who used to check in on him when I was away. He answered on the second ring, voice shaking when he heard mine. Eli, you didn't know? Your dad's been in the hospital for weeks. He's on life support. My vision blurred. I asked where. He told me. I left the house without locking the door. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and sorrow. The nurse at the desk hesitated when I gave my name. You're Elias. We've been trying to reach someone, she said. Your father's condition is critical. He's been alone. Alone. That word stabbed through me. I walked into the room, and there he was. My father. Tubes. Machines. Pale. Eyes closed. He didn't even know I was there. The man who raised me on discipline and dignity, left to wither alone while the people I trusted sent me smiling selfies from palm trees. I scrolled through social media. My hands shook. My mother, my brother, my sister, all tagged in Bali, drinking, laughing, wrapped in silk and sunscreen. Not a single post about Dad, not even a mention. That's when something inside me shut off. I didn't scream, I didn't cry, I just opened my banking app. The account I'd been funding for years, and with one press I froze everything. An hour later the chaos began, and I watched it, calmly, from beside my father's bed. The first call came from my sister. I didn't answer. Then came the messages. Eli, what's going on with the bank? I can't access anything. Did something happen? I let the notifications pile up while I sat next to my father, watching the slow, mechanical rise and fall of his chest. The sound of the ventilator was the only rhythm that made sense to me anymore. My mind wasn't racing, it was calculating. I couldn't stop thinking about loyalty, how I had worn it like a badge. I had worked in desert heat, saved like a monk, denied myself everything just so my family wouldn't have to. I was the eldest, the responsible one, the bridge between my father's sacrifices and the comfort they now lived in. But now I saw it differently. I wasn't the bridge. I was the mule, and they had walked all over my silence. Looking back, the signs were there. My sister's sudden luxury lifestyle, my brother quitting his job to focus on crypto, my mother constantly telling me, "Don't worry, we've got it handled here." But I believed them, or maybe I needed to believe them, because the alternative would have broken me years ago. But now, with the reality of my father's condition and their betrayal staring me in the face, I felt something else rise up. Not rage, not despair. Clarity. I stayed in the hospital for hours. The nurses were kind. They thought I was the only family left who cared. They weren't wrong. I sat with Dad, read his old poetry books aloud, wiped his forehead, and all the while I listened to my phone vibrate, again and again, like a rattlesnake in my pocket. But I refused to pick it up. They weren't reaching out for answers. They were reaching out for money. That night, I returned to the house. Still empty. I checked the fridge, bare, except for a bottle of soy sauce and a few shriveled lemons. I went through the drawers, bank statements, medical bills, unopened letters from the hospital marked urgent. My dad had been struggling quietly for years, and no one had said a word. He'd been reduced to a line item in their budget, something to skim from while they toasted cocktails on the other side of the world. That was when I realized the betrayal wasn't recent. It had been unfolding for years, behind smiles, behind "we miss you" texts. They didn't just abandon my father, they used him, and they used me. But that chapter had ended the moment I froze that account. They didn't know it yet, but the power had shifted, and I was no longer the one holding the burden. I was the one holding the blueprint for what came next. I spent the next 2 days in silence, not just ignoring their messages, but truly observing, watching what fell apart when I stopped holding it all together. My sister tried logging in to other accounts linked to my name. My brother emailed me, pretending to be calm, asking for a quick call. Even my mother, the matriarch of manipulation, began leaving voicemails that started sweet, then cracked into desperation. "Elias, please, it's not what you think." But they didn't realize I wasn't thinking anymore. I was seeing, and I was planning. I hired a financial forensic analyst, a friend from university now working in corporate fraud investigations. He owed me a favor. I gave him the access he needed and the time frame to review. What he found was worse than I imagined. Large withdrawals that didn't match expenses, frequent transfers from my father's medical savings account into personal travel funds, payments for luxury rentals, spa packages, even a private chef, while my father's hospital bills remained unpaid. I didn't confront them. I made copies. I built a folder. I printed screenshots, account summaries, and timelines. I requested the hospital send me a full report of my father's care history. I quietly contacted an elder care lawyer, and then I began reaching out to some of the organizations my family had been spending on, using my name. I informed them, calmly, that all charges were fraudulent, and that legal action was being prepared. I didn't need to shout. I just needed them to know I wasn't their cover anymore. With each document I added to the folder, I felt something shed from me, years of silent compliance, of guilt, of obligation to a system that never protected me. I wasn't seeking revenge for pain's sake. I was seeking alignment. The people I trusted had misused that trust. So now, I was going to redefine what trust looked like, what justice looked like. Quiet, methodical. I was playing the long game. Meanwhile, I found a full-time nurse for my father, out of my own savings. I moved him to a private room and authorized better care. The staff saw me differently now, not as a distant son from overseas, but as the only one who showed up. My father couldn't speak, but his fingers moved slightly when I read to him. That was enough. He deserved peace in his body, not to be treated like an afterthought in his own home. I set the last piece in place, a meeting with our family lawyer, who had drafted our estate documents years ago. I asked for a quiet amendment. Power of attorney transferred solely to me. I brought all the evidence, sat across from him in silence as he reviewed. When he looked up, he didn't ask me why. He simply said, "They're not going to take this well." I nodded once. They don't have to. They just have to understand it's done. It started with my sister's credit card being declined at a beachfront bar in Seminyak. She messaged me in a fury, full of exclamation points and disbelief. "Did you freeze all the accounts?" Are you insane? I didn't reply. She followed up minutes later with something colder. We need to talk. This affects all of us. I left her on read. My silence wasn't revenge. It was the space where truth echoes loudest. I had nothing to explain. Their behavior already had. By the end of that day, my brother's car rental was cancelled due to insufficient funds. My mother couldn't pay for the villa extension. Their illusion of power collapsed in real time. And I watched from my father's bedside, where the only battles that mattered were being fought in IV lines and heartbeat monitors. While they panicked, I whispered stories to a man who once taught me how to build, fix, and endure. I gave our family lawyer permission to send the documents, a letter addressed to each of them, official, unapologetic. It explained the transfer of power of attorney, the findings of financial abuse, a detailed summary of my father's care plan. There was no threat in the letter, no malice, just facts and firm boundaries, and a final line that read, "Any attempt to dispute or interfere with Mr. Grant's care will result in legal proceedings." That was it, my answer to years of betrayal, delivered without raised voice or dramatic scene. My phone exploded, missed calls, voicemails filled with denial, fake tears, even gaslighting attempts. "You misunderstood. You're overreacting. We were under pressure." I listened to none of it. Instead, I returned to the hospital that evening with a cup of hot chamomile tea and my father's favorite jazz playlist. The nurse said he had opened his eyes briefly that morning. I hoped he saw me there. I hoped in that fragile silence he knew he wasn't abandoned. Over the next few days I made arrangements. I sold the house, not out of spite, but because it no longer felt like home. I moved my father into a long-term care facility closer to me, where I could visit daily. I changed every password, closed every shared account, rerouted all mail. Piece by piece I erased the systems they had built off my back and my father's body. What they didn't know was that the ground they stood on was never really theirs. I was the one who kept it stable. They had just mistaken silence for weakness. And the most satisfying part? I never needed to speak to them again. Not once. I didn't block them. I didn't argue. I didn't even offer a final word. I left them with their own reflection, the wreckage they had created in pursuit of pleasure, while their father fought for life and their brother carried the weight. And in that mirror, they would finally see themselves clearly. That was the beginning of their reckoning, and the end of my patience. Days passed, and the noise began to die down. Fewer calls, fewer attempts. The silence wasn't just mine anymore. It had become theirs too. That's the thing about people who thrive on manipulation. When you stop reacting, they lose their script. I had removed their access, their leverage, their excuses, and with no more control over me, they were left alone with their actions. For the first time in years, I felt peace. Not triumph, peace. A quiet stillness that settled deep in my chest, like a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. My father opened his eyes that week. Just for a moment. He didn't speak, but he reached out weakly and rested his hand over mine. That gesture broke me in ways nothing else had. Not from grief, but from relief. He was still here, still fighting, and now he was surrounded by truth, not illusion. I leaned in and whispered, "You're safe now, Dad. I've got you." I don't know if he understood everything, but I know he felt my voice, and I know he believed me. I declined every family attempt at contact, not in anger, but in principle. They had made their choices, and now I was making mine. I didn't need apologies. I didn't want explanations. I didn't require a confession to know what had happened. Sometimes dignity means walking away without needing the last word. They would never truly understand the damage they caused, not just to my father, but to the foundation of trust they shattered, and that was their burden to carry, not mine. Eventually, they returned from Bali. Not to the family home, it was sold, not to the accounts, they were closed. They returned to a life that no longer belonged to them. The community knew what had happened. Word travels fast, especially when medical staff speak in low, disappointed tones and neighbors raise eyebrows at absent children. My family was met not with comfort, but with consequence. They had to explain themselves without the shield of my silence, and that was justice in its most honest form. I didn't feel joy watching their world collapse. I felt clarity. For the first time, my life wasn't wrapped around theirs. I wasn't the fixer, the provider, the forgotten backbone. I was simply a man standing in his own name, choosing peace over performance. It's a strange kind of healing, the kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from release. I didn't just reclaim the money, I reclaimed myself. And as I sat beside my father each evening, watching him slowly gain strength, I realized something profound. Sometimes, the most powerful redemption isn't loud. It's not about proving a point. It's about choosing not to carry what others tried to bury you under. I had laid it all down, every lie, every wound, every betrayal. And in that sacred space, I stood up taller than ever. A month later, I moved into a small, quiet apartment, not far from the care center where my father stayed. Nothing extravagant, just clean walls, soft light, and a sense of ownership that couldn't be taken. I began consulting locally, small projects, enough to stay busy without burning out. I found peace in simplicity. I cooked my own meals, I walked at sunrise. I slept without the weight of wondering who was lying to me. My soul finally had room to breathe. My father slowly improved. He wasn't the same man he once was, but there was a light in his eyes again, a soft awareness when I entered the room. Sometimes we'd sit in silence, just sharing space. Other times, I'd read to him or play music from the old record player I'd rescued from the family home. He couldn't speak, but his presence said more than words ever could. We were healing together, not just from what had been done to us, but from the years of things left unsaid. I never unblocked my family. I didn't attend the gatherings they tried to organize. I heard about the fallout through mutual friends, how my brother had to get a job again, how my sister's influencer deals dried up, how my mother faced quiet shame in the community. But I felt no satisfaction in it. It was never about seeing them suffer. It was about ensuring they could never hurt us again. The past was theirs to wrestle with. My future no longer included them. There's something sacred in reclaiming your voice after years of silence. It isn't loud, it doesn't need to be. It's in the choices you make when no one's watching. It's in how you protect the ones who can't protect themselves. It's in the strength to let go of bitterness and still walk in dignity. I had lost a family in the traditional sense, but I had found something far deeper: integrity, peace and purpose. Sometimes I sit at my father's bedside and talk to him about nothing in particular: sunsets, memories of fishing trips, how proud I am to be his son. I know time is short, but it feels right now. It feels honest. And when he squeezes my hand, even faintly, I know he hears me. We may not have years left, but we have truth, and that is enough. It's strange how quickly people rewrite history when they lose access to you. My mother started telling others that I had overreacted, that I was too emotional and didn't understand the pressure she was under. My siblings fed their own versions, how I had cut them off unfairly, how they were blindsided. But the truth, they were only shocked because they never thought I'd stop absorbing the consequences of their comfort. For years, I made excuses for their absence. Now, they were scrambling to justify mine. One afternoon, the elder care lawyer called. He had received a letter handwritten by my mother. No legal threats, just a plea to meet as a family and fix things. It was filled with half admissions and veiled manipulations. Your father would want unity. We made mistakes, but so have you. I didn't reply. I folded the letter once and placed it in a drawer with the rest of the evidence. Some people call that cold. I call it discipline. I will not build another bridge for people who set fire to the last one. That weekend, I brought my father outside for the first time since he woke up. It was just the courtyard garden at the facility, but it felt like a milestone. He sat in his wheelchair, face turned toward the sun, eyes closed. A quiet strength radiated from him. Even in his stillness, I watched him breathe, felt the wind through the trees, and I thought about legacy, not in the financial sense, but in the moral one. What kind of man would I be remembered as? The provider? The quiet son? Or the one who finally said enough? As I wheeled him back inside, a nurse pulled me aside. "You know," she said softly, "your father always talked about you when he was awake before. He used to brag, said you were the one who never let the family see you bleed." Her words sat with me all night, because maybe that's what this was really about. Not revenge, not even justice, but showing him that I had learned to protect myself, even when it meant protecting us both from people we loved. The truth is, there's no satisfaction in watching your family collapse under their own lies. There's only quiet confirmation that you were right to step away, that protecting your peace sometimes means accepting that not everyone gets to follow you into healing. Some stay behind in the wreckage they built with their own hands. And I don't hate them. That would still give them power. What I feel is emptier than hate. It's a simple absence, like closing the door on a room you no longer live in. I walk past it, sometimes, in memory, but I don't open it anymore. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. My brother showed up at the care facility. He didn't call ahead, didn't announce himself, just walked through the front door and asked to see our father. The staff hesitated, then came to me. I stepped into the hallway, and there he was, dressed sharp, like he was coming from a meeting, but the look in his eyes wasn't sharp at all. It was heavy, like he hadn't slept in days. We stood across from each other in silence. There was a time when we would have shared a laugh or a nod. Now there was only distance and a quiet waiting. Eventually he spoke. "I didn't come to fight. I didn't know he was that bad." I didn't correct him. He did know. He just didn't care. Not until the money dried up. Not until the photos from Bali turned to bills and backlash. I said nothing. I simply gestured to a bench and sat down. If he wanted to talk, he would have to carry the weight of the silence first. He tried to explain how things had gotten out of hand, how Mum made most of the decisions, how he felt powerless. The same script I'd heard my whole life. Men pretending helplessness to avoid accountability. I listened without interrupting, not because I believed him, but because I wanted him to hear his own voice echo back empty. When he finished, I asked a single question: "Why didn't you check on Dad once?" He blinked. No answer. That told me everything. He asked if I could consider restoring access to the family trust. That's when I stood up. Not in anger, not in drama, just in finality. "This isn't about money," I said. "This is about respect, and you lost that long before I froze anything." Then I turned and walked back inside. He didn't follow. He never visited again. That night I sat with my father and told him about the visit. His eyes were open, flickering softly. I don't know how much he absorbed, but I know he gripped my hand tighter than usual, and that was enough. Enough to know he felt safe. Enough to know I wasn't alone in this anymore. My brother never followed up. My sister sent one passive-aggressive message about how I was dividing the family. And my mother, she stayed quiet. perhaps for the first time in her life. I took their silence as a gift. The kind of gift only distance can give. Peace without explanation. Months passed. Seasons changed. My father's condition stabilized, and while his speech never fully returned, his awareness deepened. He could smile now, nod, tap his fingers when he heard old songs. We developed a language of glances, small movements, shared presence, the kind of communication that doesn't need words, only love that has survived the fire. During that time, I started volunteering at the care center. Not because I had to, but because being there reminded me of what truly matters. I read to patients, ran errands for the staff, sometimes just sat beside those who had no one left. I met a woman named Grace, a retired teacher, who brought crossword puzzles to the residents every Thursday. Her calm spirit and dry humor felt like something familiar I didn't know I needed. We started sharing coffee on the bench outside. No expectations, just two people who had known different kinds of grief and were now letting the light back in. One morning, I received a certified letter. It was from the bank. Enclosed was a formal acknowledgement that the family accounts had been reviewed and no contest would be pursued. Attached was a letter, unsigned, but clearly from my mother, a few lines in neat, tight script. I hope one day you find peace with all of this. I folded the paper and placed it in the same drawer as her first letter. I wasn't angry, I just didn't need it anymore. What struck me most was how little I missed them. There were no birthday calls, no holiday drama, no emotional manipulation wrapped in nostalgia, just stillness. I realized that family is not made sacred by blood. It's made sacred by how you show up for one another, especially when no one is watching. And my so-called family, they had chosen their comfort over commitment long ago. Sometimes, people don't come back to apologize. They come back to see if you're still bleeding, and when they find you healed, standing tall, building a life without them, it shakes something in them. But that's not your burden. Your healing is not their closure. It's your liberation. I still think about the years I lost, years spent serving people who only saw me as a resource, not a person. But I don't regret what I did. Not the silence, not the freeze, not the distance. I would do it again, every step, because it brought me here, to peace, to truth, to a life that is finally my own. I never imagined that peace would feel like this, so quiet, so grounded, almost weightless. Not a reward, not a celebration, but a steady hum in my chest that reminded me I had done the right thing. No applause, no vindication. Just a stillness that made space for something new. I wasn't living in reaction anymore. I was living on purpose. My father passed away just after the first snow. It was a soft, grey morning. I had just finished reading to him when his breathing slowed, then stilled. He went gently, the way he had lived, without needing to explain himself, without taking more than he gave. I sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, thanking him silently for being the only one who ever stood for something real. His legacy wasn't the house, it wasn't the money, it was the quiet strength he passed down to me. At the funeral, the room was small and sparse by design. I didn't invite my family. I didn't even tell them. They had buried their relationship with him long before his body gave out. Instead, I invited his old friend from the neighborhood, the nurse who cared for him, Grace, who brought flowers. It wasn't a grand farewell. It was a sincere one, and for the first time in my life, I cried without shame. After the service, I walked through the cemetery alone. Snowflakes landed softly on my coat. I thought about how many years I had spent being the glue for a family that never cared about the pieces. How long I had sacrificed my voice for harmony that never existed. But in that moment, I felt no bitterness, only gratitude for the strength to walk away, for the clarity to see what had been broken, and for the wisdom not to return. People often say blood is thicker than water, but I've learned that loyalty, love, and presence are thicker than both. I built my life back from nothing, no inheritance, no handouts, just the will to protect what was sacred and the courage to let go of what wasn't. That is what my father gave me, and that is what I now carry forward. So, if you ever find yourself sitting in the ashes of a betrayal you never saw coming, remember this: you don't have to scream to be heard. You don't have to fight to win. Sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is to rise in silence, rebuild with purpose, and walk away with everything they thought you'd never have: your peace, your power, and your name.